guys, welcome back again to my YouTube channel. My name is Abiola, and in today's tutorial we'll be recreating this lovely skirt. And before we get into the tutorial of today, if this is your first time here, you're welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, you're welcome as well. So guys, we'll be recreating the skirt that you have on the left hand side. The one I recreated is the one on the right. You've seen my inspiration and you've seen the outcome, so let's get into the tutorial of today. Before we cut out our skirt, the first thing we need to do is to calculate the radius for a half circle skirt. And to calculate the radius for a half circle skirt, you need to divide your waist circumference by pi, where pi is 3.142. Okay, you need to divide by your own waist circumference. My waist circumference is 29 inches, and like we said earlier, pi is 3.142. So I'm going to go ahead and divide 29 inches, which is my waist circumference, by 3.142, and that gives me 9.23. Then we'll go ahead to add 1 inch seam allowance to that 9.23, which gives 10.23. The next step is to go ahead now and cut on our fabric, and here's how you fold your fabric. First, I need to explain this. You know, Ankara comes in by 45 inches, meanwhile crepe, chiffon, and a lot of other fabrics come by 60. This fabric I'm working with is a very light crepe and it comes in by 60. So pay attention. What you do is to pick the edge of the fabric this way and hold on to the other end, then try to form a triangle or a cone. Okay, so you fold it to form a triangle or a cone, and you go ahead to arrange it properly on the floor. It's very easy. Okay, let me show you a zoomed out view so you see what I'm talking about. Try to form a triangle or a cone and go ahead to arrange it properly. You can also use your pins to hold the edges. I'm going ahead to use my clips to hold down the edges of this fabric so that it doesn't move too much when I'm trying to cut out. Okay, so guys, let's refer back to the calculation we did at the beginning of this video where we got 10.23. You go ahead and mark 10.23 from the top of this triangle or cone, and you go ahead to mark the 10.23 round. Okay, in order to find out if you're on the right track, you proceed to measure around this arc, this little curved line that you have made, and what you need to get should be your waist divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance. My waist circumference is 29 divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance gives 8.25, and what I got when I measured that part gave me 8.25, which implies that I am on the right track. The next step is to go ahead and add 0.5 inch seam allowance round the top, and the reason why we're adding this 0.5 inch seam allowance is because we will be joining the skirt to a waistband and we would need that allowance to join it. If you do not add the allowance, you would realize that your skirt will be bigger than the normal waistline that you have, than your normal waist circumference. So it's important that you go ahead to add 0.5 inch seam allowance at the top of the arc or the curved line. Okay, the next step is to go ahead and mark the length of the skirt. I want the length of my skirt to be 31.5 inches, but I will not just go ahead and mark the 31.5 inches. I would have to subtract the width of my waistband from the length of the skirt. 31.5 inches minus 1.5 inches will give me 30 inches. So what I will go ahead to mark is 31 inches because I'm going to add 1 inch for hemming allowance. Do you guys understand? So what I'm going to mark as my skirt length now is 31 inches. So guys, I'll go ahead to mark 31 inches from the beginning. Guys, you know I'm not starting from that 0.5 inch allowance added at the top. I'm starting from the normal waistline area. So I'll go ahead to mark 31 inches from beginning to the end. See how I'm moving my tape? That is how you should be moving yours as well. So once I'm done marking the 31 inches, I'm going to show you guys a zoomed in view of how it looks like. Now let's go ahead and cut out. Here's how you proceed to cut out. Okay, just the way you see me doing, just go ahead to cut out, so we can go ahead to cut out the back part of the skirt. Now the next step is to cut out the back part of the skirt, but there's something we must do before we cut out the back part of the skirt. Knowing that we have just finished cutting out the front part, the fabric is no longer straight like we met it at the initial stage. So what we're going to do now is to try to get a straight line on this fabric. So we're going to trim off the excess so that we can get a straight line. I hope this is explanatory, just to get a straight line again, because we'll have to form that triangle or cone again. So I'm going to go ahead to just snip or notch this at some point and rip it apart. So this particular fabric is easily ripped apart and it's going to rip in a straight like manner. So I'll just rip it apart and proceed to, in fact, that just forms my straight edge that I just wanted. So I'll go ahead to fold this fabric again, just like I told you guys at the beginning, and just to form the cone again. Okay. After doing that, go ahead to use your clips or pin to hold the fabric down. Now I'll go ahead to mark 1 inch allowance, 1 inch zip allowance from beginning to the end, because we're going to be attaching a zipper to the back of the skirt. So I'll go ahead to mark that 1 inch from beginning to the end. Note the area I'm marking my zipper allowance. Okay, so once I do that, I'll then go ahead to connect all the points I made into a straight line. Okay, so and once I'm done connecting that into a straight line, I'll go ahead to place the front part we have already cut out on top of it, and I'm going to show you how it's going to look like. The center front of the front part of the skirt should match with the area you marked your zipper allowance, the area you started marking your zipper allowance. I mean that 1 inch, that is where the front part should be on. Can you see? I've just shown you a zoomed view of how it should be like. The front part is placed around where the zipper allowance started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now to just trim what I have. Just easy peasy, just trim what you have. And after doing that, now we need to open up our zipper allowance, because it's a 1 piece at this point, but we'll have to make it into a 2 piece. So I'll go ahead to open it into 2. So once I'm done, that means we're done cutting our skirt. We'll head over to our table now to work on the skirt properly. Okay, so this is the front part, as you can see. Also, you need to iron the skirt so that it forms this crazy you're seeing at the midpoint, at that center front, because we will need that to mark our nipple to nipple measurement. Okay, because we'll need that in the making of this skirt. So my nipple to nipple measurement is 7 inches. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. I'll go ahead now to measure that 3.5 around the waist area. Okay, I'm going to go ahead to mark that 3.5, and I'm going to try to rule a straight line. To get a straight line, one thing you should not do is to go to the end of the skirt, just like I'm doing, to go and mark 3.5 inches again, then connect. This is a flare skirt. You cannot do that. You just have to eyeball it in a way to know if you are getting a straight line. Just place your ruler and try to form a straight line, or use your meter rule if you do not have that long ruler. Just place it and try to get a straight line. For me, after doing that, I realized that what I would have to measure at the edge to get a straight line is about 7 inches. Okay, see, so it matches with 7 inches. So to get a straight line, what I marked at the top is 3.5, and what I would mark at the end is about 7 inches to get the perfect straight line for the skirt. So I'll go ahead to connect the line into a straight line so that I can have a visual representation of the line. Okay, after connecting the lines, what I'll do next is to notch so as to mark the same thing at the other side of the skirt. Okay, because when you're marking your dart, you mark at the 2 sides. So after notching, I'll flip to the other side and connect the 2 notched points, because that's going to be the same thing as marking that 3.5 and 7 inches, just to make it easier for us. Okay, that is why I did it that way. I'll go ahead to just connect this line into a straight line as well. Now the next step is for you to decide where you want your slit to be. Do you want your slit to be at the other side we just marked, or at this side we're marking the straight line? For me, I want my slit to be at this side we're marking the straight line just now. Okay, you can try to flip it to the other side and use the other side for your slit, or you can use the side for your slit depending on where you want it, right or left. So I'm going to indicate that 0.5 inch allowance at the top. okay, before I mark where I want my slit to be. Then since our waistband is 1.5 inches, I'll place that 1.5 inch point at that allowance area before I mark where I want my slit to start. I want my slit to start at that 17.5 inch point, although I later adjusted it to what I wanted. When I used that 17.5, when I put it on my body, I felt like it was too low. I needed it to come higher. Okay, I'll show you what I did. Okay, the next step is to mark where you want your ruch to also start and where you want it to stop. Okay, so the next step is also, you know, indicate my 0.5 inch allowance at the top, then place my waistband, that's 1.5 inch at that point, then mark where I want this ruch to stop. Okay, so marking where I want my ruch to stop, I'm going to be marking, I want them to have a difference of about 1 inch. Since I wanted the slit to be at 17.5, the ruch should be 18.5. So 1 inch difference will make it look good, to make it look like the inspiration. Okay, so that is what I marked, but I told you guys that I later adjusted it, so please calm down and watch to that point. It will be very soon. This was the first time I worked on the slit. What I did was to mark 0.5 inch on both sides of the line. Then I went ahead to use my curved ruler to connect from that 0.5 inch to meet with that 17.5 inches I marked for my slit. If you guys can remember that I said I used 17.5 inch first before I realized that I needed the slit to be higher. Okay, so after connecting the point, I went ahead to use my scissors to cut everything out. Guys, this fabric moves a whole lot, so I tried my best to get the lines properly. You can use your ruler to connect the points, or you can use your curved ruler, anyone. So just take a look at how I went ahead to calmly cut the slit area, how I would want it to be. I didn't want the slit to be too wide because we'll still turn this slit area with a facing. Okay, so if it's too wide, when you turn it with a facing, it gets wider. So I made it as narrow as possible. Okay, so that's just watch closely and take a look at how I was able to achieve the slit. At this point, when I was done cutting out the slit, I went to the front of my mirror. I placed the skirt how it is going to be, and I realized that the slit is not as high as I would love it. So I took my ruler and I went up by 2 inches more. Okay, I went up by 2 inches more and I cut out the slits to that point. Okay, so that was what I was telling you guys, that I did not really like how the slit was looking, so I had to cut it more, which implies that we have to also, you know, adjust the ruch area. This implies that we marked 15 inches at the slit area, so on the ruch area we're going to go ahead to mark 16 inches. I told you guys that I want the slit to vary from the ruch area by just 1 inch. I just want the difference to be 1 inch to achieve what I want, so I'll go ahead to mark 16 inches at this point. All right, the next step is to cut out 3 pieces of fabric that's about 2 inches in width and about 27.5 inches in length. The 3 of them should be of equal length. It's not really important, but just for you to understand what we are doing here. Okay, 2 of them will serve as the rope and 1 will serve as the channel for the ruch. Okay, now let's go ahead to cut out a facing for the slit, because we'll have to turn it. We can't leave it the way it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead to place the skirt over this piece of fabric on the table, and when I do that, I'll arrange it properly. Then I'll go ahead to use my scissors. First I'll use my pins to hold it down so that it doesn't move all over the place. So after pinning it down, then I'll go ahead to use my scissors to cut through. After cutting that out, I'll go ahead to decide how wide I want the facing to be. So this is what I'm just doing, cutting out how wide I want it to be. Guys, I went ahead to give my facing a curved, you know, angle, knowing fully well that I'm going to hem it. Guys, when I realized that this is going to be a bit difficult, I went ahead to make it a bit straight. Let me just show you. I made that part straight so that it's easier to hem with my hemming gum. You guys know that it's easier to hem a straight angle than a curved angle, so I just changed that. So guys, I've gone ahead to stitch my rope using 0.5 inch seam allowance. I marked my 0.5 inch before going to my sewing machine so I can stitch on the line, because I want this rope to be 0.5 inches exactly. Now I'll go ahead to trim off the excess allowance there, and I will also go ahead to flip it to the right side. I'm going to use my broomstick because it's going to make it easier for me. One important thing to note is that when forming this rope, only one end is open, so you stitch the other end by 0.5 inch as well, so only one end of this rope should be open by the time you are done. So I'll do the same thing for the other rope, but I'll be doing that off camera. For the slit area, I'll go ahead and stitch the facing to the slit using 0.5 inch seam allowance, and I would also go ahead to top stitch and trim off any excess allowance. I would also notch. Do you see this exact angle I'm notching? It is very important. Like, if you don't notch and you flip it over, you see that your skirt is looking one kind and you don't want yours to look one kind or you don't want the slit to be looking, you know, weird. So you have to notch that point, like make slight incisions with your scissors at that point. You can see the cut. I know you can see it. So I'll go ahead now to iron the slit area. I'm also going to use my hemming gum to iron it properly. I'm going to explain in detail what I did at this point. First off, I went ahead to iron first before using my hemming gum. I ironed the slit area properly. Then now I want to go in with my hemming gum. I'm going to place my hemming gum at the edge. Then I'm going to iron. After ironing, I would also want the facing, the edge of the facing to be neat. So I'll go in with my hemming gum again. But this time, I'm going to fold the edge of the facing so that it becomes neat. You don't want to leave it hanging out like that. But if you have a weaving machine, you can as well weave. If you weave, it's going to make everything easy for you. So once I iron, as you can see, it's becoming really neat. This same thing I just did, I'm going to do it round. I'll iron with the hemming gum, then I'll also fold in the edge, and by the time we are done, you're going to see that this is going to look really neat. Now let's work on the third piece of fabric. Remember, we cut out 3, we've used 2 for the rope, and this one we'll be using it for the ruch channel. What I did was to fold the edge using 0.5 inch allowance. I folded 0.5 inch on one side, 0.5 inch on the other side, so that the rope becomes 1 inch in width. So guys, what I did is easy. Just fold using 0.5 inch on both sides so that it becomes 1 inch, because it comes as a 2 inch in width piece of fabric. So now I'm going to go ahead to trim off the excess allowance on each side. Okay, I'm going to trim from beginning to the end. Make sure you have at least about 0.3 inch allowance at the side after trimming, or about 0.25, because you still need some fabric, some piece of fabric on each side. Okay, so I'll go ahead to trim off now. The next step, guys, is to finish one of the edge of this piece of fabric, and we're going to use our hemming gum to achieve that. So I folded it using 0.5 inch seam allowance, and I used the hemming gum to fold it because we don't want any stitch at that point. The next step is to bring back the front part of the skirt. Guys, here is how it looks. Okay, so look at the slits. I have finished ironing that part and it looks good already. Now I'm going to go to the other side where we marked the other dart, and the thing is, we marked it at the back, so I'm going to mark it again properly so that this fabric is very light. So if I use my chalk to highlight it better at the back, it's going to show in front. So that's what I just did. But if your fabric is not as light as this one, you can just go ahead to remark it in front. So right now I can see my line in front, but it's not really visible on the camera. So I'm going to go ahead now to place this fabric on the line. Like, the line is going to be in the middle of this fabric, like at the midpoint of this fabric. Okay, so you remember that this ruch area, stopped at about, is it 15.5 inches? I can't really remember. I'll put it on the screen. So I'm going to pin it at that point, which is why we finished the edge using our hemming gum. So I'm going to pin this down, and what we are going to do when we head to our sewing machine is to stitch
by this side from beginning to the end, then stitch by the other side from beginning to the end, then stitch at the midpoint. You know, divide it into 2 equal parts and stitch at the midpoint, because we're going to pass these ropes that are about 0.5 inch through that point, so it needs to be equal. So guys, as you can see, I'm gonna head to stitch like I told you guys. I've formed the channel for the rope. The next step now is to pass in the rope, and I'm going to use my safety pin to pass in the rope. Note that when you're passing in your rope, the edge that is not closed is what you're going to pass in, okay, and the closed edge is what is going to be visible to the eye, I mean when you're done passing the rope. After passing in your rope, the next step is to work on the back part. What we're going to do for the back part is to place them right sides facing each other. Then we're going to go ahead to stitch the zipper allowance, the 1 inch, and yeah, once we're done with that, we'll place the front and the back right sides facing each other, the way you see me doing. We'll place them right sides facing each other, and we are going to stitch using, you know, we added 1 inch seam allowance now, so we'll stitch the side using 1 inch seam allowance. After working on this, we'll go ahead to work on our waistband, and here is the fabric I've cut out for my waistband. As usual, you know, I always cut out more than I need for my waistband, and my waist circumference is 29 plus the zipper allowance, which is 1 inch on both sides. I'm supposed to cut out 31 inches, but what I have here is about 40 something. I'm not going to be using everything, but I just like to have more than I need. So 43 inches is what I have at that point, and the width is 6 inches. I do not need up to the 6 inches, but I prefer to have more. I think I need about 4 to 4.5 inches, but I prefer to have that. So now I'm going to cut out this facing, interfacing, it is called chest gum in the local market. I'm going to measure out 1.5 inches, which signifies how wide I want my waistband to be. So I'll go ahead to use my scissors to, you know, notch the part, and I'll just rip it apart. And once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead to iron it on the waistband, and I'm going to leave 0.5 inch from the top before I iron the chest gum on the fabric. Okay, that 0.5 inch signifies our allowance that we use to join the to the skirt part, the allowance we will need to join the waistband to the skirt part. So I'm going to iron it in this straight format from beginning to the end. So once I'm done ironing the facing to the waistband, I'll go ahead to flip it like this into 2 and just iron, okay, just to form that waistband crease. Once you fold it, this interfacing will already give you a clue of how it's supposed to be folded, okay? So I'll just go ahead to fold from beginning to the end just to form that crease, that waistband crease. The next step is to cut off excess allowance, okay, because we don't need everything. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut the excess at this point from beginning to the end. The next step is to go ahead to attach the waistband, and in order to attach this waistband, I will have to open up my zipper allowance a bit to the point where I want my zipper to stop. I've already gone ahead to do that. So the next step now is to place the skirt and the waistband right sides facing each other. Guys, this illustration is wrong. I actually thought the skirt was already turned to the right side, but please, the skirt should be turned to the right side before you do the step. So what we're going to do at this point is to stitch that 0.5 inch allowance, is to stitch from beginning to the end, just the way I'm showing you guys. So you can go ahead to pin from beginning to the end, or you can as well just go to your sewing machine and just stitch round just the way I'm showing you guys from beginning to the end. Remember, it should be placed right sides facing each other, not right side to wrong side the way I was illustrating. Here is what I have, guys, when I was done. Can you see how it's looking? And now this is the last step we need to take to fully fix our waistband. So what you need to do is to flip to the wrong side, because we're making use of the stitch in a ditch method. You're going to push that allowance inwards, push the allowance inwards, then fold. You're going to fold
from the wrong side of the skirt, and when you fold, you're going to flip back to the right side. You can use your pins to hold this before you go, because we don't want any stitch to show at the front of the skirt. So when you flip to the front side, you stitch in the ditch, you stitch in this ditch, and by the time you are done, you will realize that you will probably not see any stitch at that point. In fact, you will not see any stitch, except you are actually still learning how to do this. So you can go ahead to pin this if you are a beginner. Okay, so let me just show you how you're going to do it. If you are a beginner and you feel like you need to pin before you understand, you fold this inwards and fold the waistband this way, then pin from the front, because you are stitching from the front in the ditch. So you pin and take a look at how it looks at the back. It's going to hold the waistband behind. You flip again, you also pin from the front because you are stitching from the front. And can you see how it looks like? It's already looking good. So this is what you're going to do from beginning to the end for this waistband. You are stitching in the ditch. You're not stitching at the back, oh, you're stitching in front. Okay, so guys, here's what I have when I was done. Can you see how it looks like? So we stitched from the front. So if you check the front, you would not even see any stitch at all, but you see your stitch at the back. So I went ahead to cut off the excess allowance. So guys, the last step to take is to fix your zipper. After fixing your zipper, go ahead to hem the base of your skirt, and here's what we have. I'm on a